Welcome to PyWeb Houston. So I'll be talking tonight. If you haven't gotten any food or pizza, feel free to step out and get some. Thanks to our sponsors approving, they sponsored the place and the food tonight, so thank you. I was hoping to get a special, like, Azure, we're going to do like a combination between us and Azure group, but I think it's going to happen next month. So we'll do Microsoft and then do Google tonight instead. So there you go. Also, you know, we actually have a good amount of sponsors for the meetup now, but don't be afraid to come up on here, and this is the new interface, but there's a donate button somewhere. I don't see it anymore, so hopefully they put that back. Yeah, this is all new.
It's money down there.
Where's it at? That's money because I'm the organizer of the group. There used to be a donate button, so I don't know where that's at. But if you would like to donate, you can donate somewhere on here. Any money you donate will go to things that cost money for the meetup. So the main thing is costs money to be on meetup.com, so it pays for that kind of stuff. And when we can't find sponsors, we usually buy pizza for that month. So if you can find the button too, let me know where it's at so I can show it off next time on the redesign. Yeah, I don't know where it's at. All right, we'll have to file a bug report. So tonight, I'm going to talk about doing Google Actions with Python. You can get, did you find it?
Yeah.
Is it on the mobile? Where is it at?
It's a button called Chip In.
Yeah, maybe try incognito.
Chip in. Oh, that's a good point here. Let's try it out. Maybe because I'm the...
Not to distract. What matters is it's there.
Well, we need money, so that's like the most important thing. Well, that's the old one. So that's where it is on the old site. But that's not the new interface. Anyway, if you want these slides tonight, that's right there on that first link. I actually wrote a Google action, and I'll kind of show that off later. I call it Neutron Academy, which lets you take quizzes. So you can like enter a quiz on here, and then you can take it through a Google Assistant. But I'll show that off a little bit more here in a second. And if you want to find me, you can find me on Twitter. I'm the Pizza Panther, or through meetup.com. Feel free. I'm the organizer, so if you send them the message to the organizer, I'll get it there too. All right, so let's talk a little bit about Google Actions. So first of all, you may be asking, what is a Google Action? So you probably all have heard of the Amazon Echo. So Google has a competitor to that called Google Home, which runs the Google Assistant. So anytime you want to build like an application that works on Google Assistant, that's what a Google Action is. So, and the one thing that people don't realize is unlike the Echo, you don't need necessarily that Google Home device. So Google Actions work on, I don't know, like 70–80% of Android phones already. And some of the new Chromebooks also have Google Assistant built in too. So even if you don't have a Google Home, you can still use a lot of this stuff. So yeah, it works on their Google Home device. Actually, let's go to their store. We'll do a little shopping here. So let's see. It works on this nice speaker that's a lot of money. Where's their Google Home at? So it works on the new one, the Google Mini that they just announced. This is the older one. The Google Home works on that. Also works on your phone. So if you get your phone and you say,
Okay, Google.
hopefully I don't set off your phone, okay Google, tell me the weather.
Currently in Houston, it's 79
So,
clear.
works on your phone.
It's predicted to be 75
Let's see if I can get my Chromebook to work also. Okay, Google, what's the weather tonight? And no, it's not going to work. Let's try it this way. What's the weather?
And you made her phone show the weather.
Well, we'll talk about this too. The other option that you actually have, what also you don't realize, a lot of people don't realize, is you can actually type also. So it's not just a voice interface. You can say, what's the weather? And now it'll bring me up through a text interface also. So it's not just a voice interface too, it does voice and text, which is kind of cool. So yeah, it's actually on the iPhone also. So if you download the Google app on the iPhone, it's there. It's on the TVs and it's on a bunch of stuff. So anytime you want to write one of these apps or these interfaces for yourself, that's what's called a Google action. All right. So now there's a couple ways to build a Google action, and you don't actually necessarily even need to code anything. This is the site where you want to go to start your action, and we'll go through this in a second. But they have, they released maybe a couple months ago or a month ago what's called a template. So if you click on that template button, they have kind of pre-built apps, and you can take those and it will set everything up, and you just give it a name, and you can have a Google action. A lot of them are kind of hooked up to like spreadsheets. So you edit the spreadsheet in Google Docs, and your action gets updated, and it will build kind of simple little apps for you that way. Just kind of play around with it. So that's one option, no coding required. Another option is to use, they have, the first two are in their console now. They've announced these last two, but I haven't seen them show up in the console yet, so I'm assuming they're coming. But you could use this dialog flow or this Converse API. And basically the way those work is you go in, you set up your app, and they'll do a lot of the hard work for you. You might have to go in and like kind of program some logic into their interface to how you're going to respond to how people say things. And you may do a little bit of your own coding in various ways, but they can kind of help you get started faster if you use some of those. Now with that said, it's actually not too hard to write these from scratch, and so that's what I'm going to go over tonight. Is how do you just use any language. We'll use Python, but any language that does web development, you can do a Google action with. All right. So before I go over my very technical diagram here, I was going to go over, show off my little Neutron app here, because they all work very similar. Talk to Neutron Academy. There we go. I guess you can't hear it because of the HDMI. Let me switch my output.
Skills to pay the bills.
Random quiz.
Down the quiz, Fathers of Science.
Oh, you guys should
You
know
can
this one.
stop the quiz anytime by saying stop quiz. Let's start with the first question. Who is the father of psychology?
Freud. Carl Jung.
Speak up.
Question at any time or try another answer. Who
Freud.
is the father of psychology?
Freud.
Incorrect.
I've noticed that since this is a brand new device, it doesn't get the voice recognition. The Google Assistant or the Google Home works a lot better for some reason. So yeah, you were wrong.
Carl Jung?
It's actually William Wundt. who was the father of geometry?
Euclid.
Let's see if I spelled that right. All right, we're going to stop the quiz there. So the way these actions work is you'll register a phrase. So I register Neutron Academy. You have to pick 2 words at least. You can pick more. But when you say, okay, Google, talk to Neutron, now it's going to work. Talk to Neutron Academy. That's going to call,
Here's what I found on the web.
that's going to call your Google action. Once you kind of get into that flow, it's then up to you to build that conversational interface. So when you say one thing, what's going to happen? When you say another thing, and it's kind of up to you to keep track of where you're at in the conversation, and produce answers as you go through. And we'll go. It's actually not too hard to do all this. We'll go through and set this up. So to go over my super technical diagram here. So first thing you're going to say is, you're going to say, okay, I won't say his name, talk to whatever words you registered, right? That's going to go to the device. Google's going to process that, figure out, which app it should connect to. It's basically going to call a web interface, so you need a server out there that's going to catch these things. So you'll have what's called an intent. So you'll know it's a new conversation because you get a certain type of intent from that. And you also have a conversation ID that's passed to you. So at all times, that conversation for that user, that ID will stay the same. So that's one way you can track that you're in the same conversation. All right, so you probably are going to make a response, hopefully, send it back to Google. Google's going to speak that. Again, the user maybe responds. If it's something like the weather, maybe you just give them the weather, and the user doesn't have to respond. But you can control whether you're expecting a response or whether you're just going to say something and be done with it. So if the user responds, again, that's going to come back through Google. You'll get a different kind of intent for that. So again, that's one way that you can detect, the point of the conversation you're in. And again, you'll probably send a response, and it's up to you. That will go back and forth until you're done with the conversation. So that's a super technical interview, or not interview, super technical explanation of what's going to happen. Let's actually go build something. So this is kind of the steps I'm going to go through. So number 1, I guess before I go to number 1, I created a sample app, and what I'm going to do is it's just going to be, actually I think I set the wrong key there, but it's just a small Python tornado app, and it's going to do the weather. So first thing it's going to do is ask you what city you want. We're going to respond with what city, and then it will give us the weather. It will look it up via an API, look up the weather for us, and then give us the weather for that city. All right. So if you want to try that out, you're welcome to clone this and try it out too. But I'll go through and set it up. So the first thing we need to do is we need to go into our Actions console. And you can see I have a couple apps there, Neutron Academy. I'm going to do a new app. And I'm going to call this, when I was testing it, I was calling it Mr. Weather, so I'll call this Mrs. Weather. And it'll be in the United States, so I'm going to create that project. And we wait. Alright, so now this is where you have your options. If you wanted to use one of those other kind of APIs to help you out, you would just click on one of these and start building it and you have like a web interface that would kind of help you along. We're going to do the build from scratch, so that's what's called the Action SDK. So we're going to go through this. All right, so we're at the point now where we're actually on step 2. So you need this little command line utility, and the first thing you kind of got to do is set up this action.json, and this tells Google what, when a request comes through, where am I going to send it to? So let's take a look at that real quick. So this is the action.json. You can have multiple intents, but I'm going to just start with a real simple one here. So the main intent is when the user first jumps into that conversation. So you always got to have at least a main intent. So when they say, "Okay, Google, start my app," of course he's listening to me now. That's when the main intent gets executed. And so I'm just giving that a name. Then at the bottom here, this is the other required field. You give your app a name. I'm calling it Weather App. You have to give it an endpoint. So I'm going to log into my server here. It really helps if you kind of develop this on an external server, because Google has to talk to that server in order to do and test this stuff out. So you can't really, I guess if you created some kind of tunnel to your local machine, that would work. But it's easier if you have an external server to work off of. So once I get this published, though, I'll change that to my production system. But for this demo, I'm going to go off of this. So every call or every thing that comes into Google, it's going to send it to that one URL. That's where I'm going to do all my processing. This right here is optional, and we'll look at the references in a bit. But that took me like 2 days to figure out. If you don't have that there's a version 1 of the API, and at different points in the process, Google will decide to send you version 1 for some things and version 2 for other things. So I got half my code working, and then I got to the next steps, and then all of a sudden it totally broke. And then I would fix that thing, and then the rest of my code broke, because it was communicating with 2 different API versions. So if you put version 2 in here, that will tell Google, I want to use version 2 of the API, and just stick with that. So that took me a long time to figure out which version and how to pin it. So I'm going to use version 2. There's a version 1 is the older one. All right, so once you have that action.json, we got to go ahead and upload it. So I'm going to copy this line. And so you can see this is the code that I have in that GitHub. There's my action file. So let's see. We got to put our package name in here. All right, and my project is Mrs. Weather. All right, so now I've uploaded that JSON file. Let's check. Now I'm good to go here. I have to start filling out some of the rest of this information. I think I could probably skip this for the demo, but I'll go through some of it. So yeah, we can give our app a name, so I'm going to call this Mrs. Weather. You have to tell it how you want to pronounce this. So I guess Mrs. would be like this, maybe?
US.
Like that?
Yeah.
All right, let's see what it sounds like. Mrs. Weather. Play that.
Mrs. Weather.
Yeah, sounds good. You got to come in here and give yourself some details.
I purchased concert tickets.
you can pick what the default voice is. Now you can change this, I believe, with your how you respond also, but this will kind of be like your default voice. I guess we'll do that one since it's Mrs. Weather. Fill that out. Yeah, the weather for your city. All right. So you can see here, this is where you get to pick how you want your app to be called. So, is this even showing? Oh yeah, there it is. So, you can change some of this, but that's kind of, I think the default is like talk to, or you could say like, I don't know, depending on what your app does, maybe like work with, put some kind of action in there, whatever your app does.
Blame Mrs. Weather.
That's a good one. You can come in here, upload some logos. There's actually an app store for these things, and I got a really bad review on mine, but I've never seen the app store, so I don't know where they're coming from. Let's see. I'll just put in some logos I had. Alright, so let's upload those. That looks good. Alright, and you'll need, this is optional. I'll put in an email. Yep. And you do need a privacy policy also. So I'm just going to make one up for right now. Where's that action? Where did I put this stuff? In here. Look wrong at. Where did I put that stuff? So I'm just going to copy my URL and say that I have a privacy policy here. Alright, we're going to save that. And now, I guess I got to do an app category. Where was that at?
Near the end.
Here we go. We'll do. What's a good app? Here we go. Weather.
Makes sense.
That really makes sense. All right, I think we should be good to test this now. All right, so when we're ready to go, we're going to go ahead and test this. And this is the test interface that we can use. And you can see I can do talk to Mrs. Weather,
Mrs. Weather isn't responding right now.
and you can see it's going to fail because I didn't start up my server yet. So that's our next step.
That was fast.
So we need to fill in, we did all the app info. Now you have to create some code to handle and process these things. And then hopefully you get this published. It takes a couple days and you can party like that guy. So let's look at our code real quick that I'm going to run. So I made like a really small tornado app. And I'm going to have to change that project ID. So I'll remember to do that before I get started here. So I'll kind of go through this in a bit, but I have one handler here. And you can see at the bottom, I have one URL. So anything that comes into this little web server, I'll go ahead and send it to that one handler to handle the request. And I'll go through that in a minute. But let's me put in my new app ID. I got to change that. So that's, and your app ID, in case you need it, you'll probably need it sometimes, is under your project settings. So that's my project ID. Alright, so let's start this up and see what happens. And then I'll kind of go through some of the code here. Alright, so let's go back to our simulator.
All right, here's the test version of Mrs. Weather. What city would you like the weather for?
We'll do London. How's that sound?
Miserable.
The temperature in London is 48 degrees.
Almost miserable.
Alright, so you can see, right, pretty fast, we had something that actually works. So let's kind of go through the code though and see what it's actually doing. So in this tornado code, you can see I have one endpoint, right? So when that comes through, you can see, right, Google's doing a post request to that endpoint, and I just did some print statements here. You're going to respond with some kind of response, and we'll go over that here in a second too. And so Google's just going to keep on hitting that endpoint, and you've got to send a response back. So
Was that the session ID that was printed out?
yeah, this is actually the conversation ID, and then I also printed out the intent. So you can see the first time it came through, it did that main intent. Second time it came through, it did this text intent. And I'll show that off here. So this is my handler. So if you get a post request, here we go. That's what's gonna, for tornado, this is what gets called when you get a post request. I'll go over the authentication towards the end here. But you're going to receive a bunch of JSON data when Google calls your endpoint. And I did put that in the repo also. So let's look at that. So this is kind of what you're going to receive when Google calls your app. So you'll see there's the conversation, there's the conversation ID. That's how we track that. It gives you some capabilities of the device. So, it'll tell you if that device can do audio, if it can do text. So you can see, since I was on the simulator, it can do both. If you write your action the right way, you can do both without even thinking about it too much. But if you're maybe playing sound effects and different things, you might want to check that before you play a sound effect. You can see this is the incoming data. So you can see that's the intent. That's the text that the person said or typed in. You can see it was a keyboard. And then we have some extra data. You can also do user tracking. Since I didn't set my app in the console up, basically I get a random user ID every time. But you can ask to link it to their Google account if you wanted to do something, with their Google account. Question?
Can you specify that an action works only with a specific device type or device ID?
Yeah, so you can say, certain intents only work for screen or certain intents only work for audio, I think.
But I mean,
So,
could you limit it to a smartwatch versus a tablet versus a phone?
I don't think you could do it by that. I think you can only limit it by text and audio right now. So, yeah, I don't think you can tell which type of device other than that. So that's what comes into the system. So in my Python code, there you go. I parse the JSON. I get the intent out of that. So you can see that's where I'm printing the intent on the screen. Then right here, I'm getting the conversation ID, so I'm looking at getting the conversation out. Now the cool thing, right, is Google really does a lot of the hard work for you, because if I wanted to add some extra text processing, they do all the sound recognition, speech to text type stuff, and you get it in your JSON object that comes along. So you don't really have to do a lot unless you're doing some kind of like extra processing after that.
So I think related to his question, when you get that, the request data, is there any other information in that would let you identify where the request came from? So-
Yes, actually, and I haven't played with this yet, but you can see in this, I think if I ask for permissions, I could get this location data also. So you can tell that. You have to set up your app for that permission, I believe. So there is other information. Also, there's like a transactional thing, so you could potentially like hook it up to their Google Wallet. Is that what they call it nowadays? Or is it Android Pay or something?
Android.
Yeah. So you could potentially have like, it hooked up to their credit card, and you wouldn't get their credit card information, but you have like some kind of link that you could charge or purchase something on, through their Google Android Pay.
Is there anything that would let you identify, like for instance, I've done a little bit of stuff like with like the Twilio API, and I know like, if you like send a text message, one of the things that you get in the response is the number that the text came from. And so is there anything that identifies like any sort of identifier for the device? So like if I talk to it from like the Google app on my laptop versus on my phone, would there be a different identifier that would let me know, hey, this is one device, this is another device?
Yeah, I
So
don't
is
know
it just
about
come
that.
as the user ID?
You get the user ID, so you could, you could potentially tell if you set that up. Again, I didn't actually ask for permissions, so the user ID that I get is going to be random. But if you ask for permissions for that, you could potentially do some kind of user tracking and set up like an account for that person. So I don't know if you can get the device or not. So
What about like the screen resolution?
yeah, no, it's just you just get the capabilities of either audio output or screen output. You can see that here. So I don't know. You may be able to. Haven't tried playing with that yet. And also for what I did, I was trying to make it as flexible as possible. So my little quiz app, I really want like students to use it. So if they have a Google Home, I want them to be able to use it. Or if they go home and need the text on a Chromebook, I want them to be able to use it also. So I tried to make mine as flexible as possible. I want to support both capabilities. All right, so that's the first part of the code here. All right, so now you can see, this is a really simple app. I detect if it's the main intent, which is that first one when you call the app, right? And so if it's the main intent, I'm going to start the conversation. If it's any other intent, I'm going to go ahead and get the city and look that up and get the weather. So let's look up the conversation here, or start the conversation. So that's up here at the top. So this is basically what you're going to respond with. And again, this is just JSON. So you get JSON in, you push some JSON out. Right here, I'm saying, and actually you can make up that main intent as kind of, Google will send you that one. After this, you can kind of make up intents also. So this is just one that I saw in the doc, so I used it. But you can kind of make your own custom intents also. So I'm responding. I'm saying, I expect the user to give me an answer after this. So set that to true. This is where you can set what kind of responses you're expecting. So I'm just going to do a simple response, which you can see down here. You could say like, okay, it has to be a voice response, or it has to be a text response. So there's all kinds of different responses you can expect. If you do the simple response, it will work for both, any device that they're on. And with the simple response, you can return just plain old text, and it will speak it. You can also return what's called SSML. And do I have a link for that? Yeah. I guess that's my sample. I'm already showing this off. Let's look that up. So SSML is kind of like HTML, but it's markup for how you would speak something. And it's a standard. You can see this is actually coming from Amazon's docs because the Echo uses the same thing. And so, you can say, okay, speak this, and there's all kinds of little markups that you can put in here. So like, there you go, like for that number, I guess it will say the cardinal number, so that's like, I forget the difference now. Like it may say like 12,345, maybe, I forget. Or this one, you can see this markup tells it to spell out hello. Or you can put in breaks. So if you want to kind of pause, you want to say one thing and then maybe pause for a second, you can put in a break tag. Emphasis is good, so if you want it to kind of say something stronger, right, you'd use an emphasis tag. So you can see I'm just doing mine real simple, but if I wanted to throw in any of those tags, I can make it speak a little bit differently if I wanted to.
I was wondering, does the Google Home, the Google Actions currently support other languages than English?
Yeah, it does actually.
For like, I know you can ask it, how do you say whatever in whatever language, but we were trying to speak Chinese to it,
Yeah.
and it didn't
I think
understand anything. It said, I don't understand. Or
I think you
something.
might have to set it as like your user language first.
Okay.
And also, yeah, I don't know if they have Chinese yet, but
Yeah,
they do have some other languages.
They do?
Yeah, but, so with foreign languages, it's a little bit weird, right? So I speak Dutch, for example.
Okay.
So the keyboard is easy, right? Although it sometimes accidentally goes to the wrong language. But with the voice interpreter, yeah, you can get it to basically talk back to you
Okay.
and
I think
understand. structure.
And it can
Yeah.
converse in
And I
Chinese.
think for Chinese, it probably is Mandarin.
Yes.
so. You can see here's I guess they support 213 countries.
That's pretty amazing.
I haven't tested that. I only speak English.
Well, that
and
may be
Latin.
that may be geographical limits, not necessarily language.
Yeah, I don't know how many languages. But I believe it does support, and I do believe it's actually pretty recent that they just added that.
I have one other question.
Sure.
Kind of related, but so is it possible to link the voice actions with visual output on the screen, like say through like an HTML-based JavaScript game or something like that?
Yeah, so you can put in pictures. Actually, all right, let's try that. Okay, Google, tell me the weather. So you can see like the Google
Now
action
in Houston, it's 78 and clear.
puts that
The
in for you.
forecast tonight is 75 and clear.
So you can put in pictures, you can put in like sound effects. Some of the other quiz apps, like do little bells ring and different things.
Okay.
So yeah, you can put that all in. This is really simple. Also the note though, Google doesn't support all the tags that the Echo supports yet. So I don't know if it supports all these, but it does do breaks and emphasis, I think. But it doesn't do all these, so it doesn't have full support for SSML yet. All right, so that's what's going to get sent back to the user, and it's going to speak it. All right, so let's go try this again here. Where's my console at? So let's go to the second intent now.
Sure, here's the test version of Mrs. Weather. What city would you like the weather for?
So we'll try Houston now.
The temperature in Houston is 77 degrees.
So let's talk about that second intent. So that was the first one where I started the conversation. So the second one, again, you have data that comes in. I get from that JSON response, I get the text value of the argument that they told me, that they said, right? Which is going to be a city, and now I'm going to respond with the weather for that city. So you can see I'm using the Open Weather Map API. I get the weather for that city. They actually give you the temperature in Kelvin, so that's really fun. All right, and again, right, you're going to respond with some JSON. Now this one, I'm going to say this is my final response. I'm not expecting anything to come back, so that's it. I'm entering the conversation.
So that's why it said, and leaving the conversation.
Yeah, so you can see on the simulator here, it said that. And then you can see I'm saying the temperature is blah, blah, blah. I'm filling in the city, and I'm filling in the temperature, and it's going to speak that. So the other cool thing though is, so you can do all this in the simulator. This is like the phone interface. Actually, here's all the languages here.
That's annoying.
Okay, so yeah, that's all the languages they support, and Chinese is not in there.
Oh.
So there you go. If we wanted to, we could switch this to speaker interface. And now, if I talk to this, it would send that, hey, he's coming from a speaker interface and not a phone interface. And so I wouldn't see in that JSON, I wouldn't see screen output anymore. I'd only see audio output. Your other option is it actually links it, if you have like a Google Home or a phone, it actually links it to the device too. So let's see if this works. Talk to Mrs. Weather.
Okay, here's the test version of Mrs. Weather. What city would you like the weather for?
Seattle.
The temperature in Seattle is 41 degrees.
So you can see eventually you want to plug this in and test it on like a real device, not just in the simulator. If you're in here and you have testing running, any of your Google Homes or your phones that are connected to your personal account will now get the test version of your app. So if you want to go back, you can see there's a little button here. Hit that, that will deactivate the test version, and your Google Home will go back to whatever's published out there. But that's how you test it on real life devices before you maybe go publish your app. It's just as long as this testing is on, it knows that, hey, I'm Paul, and he has a testing app that he's playing around with, and so it connects to for you automatically. So that's pretty cool. All right. So went over that, went over testing in the simulator, testing with a real world device. And I went over the sample input, the sample output. This is kind of the documentation of all the things that will come in. So this is documentation of all the request data that you could possibly get. So here, let's go to that question of the device. Yeah, it looks like you just get location. And capabilities, anything else? I don't see anything else in there. So yeah, I believe that's the only thing you can get. And then let's look at, this is the API documentation for any response. Basically, you have to follow this documentation. And so you can go through here, and there's actually all kinds of, I did really simple responses. There's actually a bunch of different response types that you could do. So you could do like multiple choice. I just did free form, get whatever. But you could do all kinds of like, this item one is like a multiple choice where they pick, out of the choices, list of choices. Let's see what else they have. Simple response. Basic card. So card, when you saw the Google weather thing come up, that's a card. So you could respond with a card. a button. So if you want them to maybe click a button to go buy something, there you go. You can send them a link.
I was just curious, so when you're using the weather API, was that something that you coded in on your Tornado app, or is that part of
Yep.
the? Okay.
So you can see, I just used that Open Weather API, and I did a request to look up that city, and then I got the temperature of that city.
Okay.
Now, let's say that I wanted to do, after this, I wanted to continue the conversation and say like, okay, would you like another city? So then that's another intent. Or you could track that conversation ID and say, where am I at in the conversation? So like for my quiz app, when you start a quiz, I track that, okay, you're on question number 1. So you get that right, move to question number 2, and I have that all in the database. So there's different ways to track the conversation, but it's up to you to kind of decide where you're at and respond appropriately. Any questions on any of this? That's all I have.
So let me make sure I understand, like, kind of the way it works. Your Google device sends a JSON object to your production server.
Yep.
The production server responds back with a JSON object.
Yep.
And you can do anything on your production server that you want. You can look up things or whatever.
Yep.
And you return some sort of a language or a picture or whatever.
Yep.
So if I wanted to layer in authentication to say, like, hey, Google, what were my sales last month? And I don't want the whole world to know my sales. Right? I know that I have the Google ID.
Yep.
But I know that I could fake that too and go directly to your production server. So is there a way to
So there's a couple ways that I can think of off the top of my head. So number one, yeah, if you could link it to your Google account, and so that Google ID, you'd be able to tell, who that is, and then you could say, okay, yes, I trust this user, and then respond with the information.
But is the Google ID like a text, a human readable format, or is it some sort of like long 256-bit?
Yeah, it's going to be long, but you'll get some kind of, when you go through that process, it's like OAuth. So when you go through that process, you're going to know, like, this is Paul Bailey, and this is his ID. So every time he connects, Google will give you that ID.
Okay.
So yeah, that's going to be secure. Now the way I did it for this, actually for my app, I built in some classroom features. I wanted teachers to be able to like create a quiz and then have their students take it. So this is a little less secure, but I made it up like passphrase. So you have like a passphrase for your class to get into your class that way. And then they don't have to sign up for anything either. So that is probably a little less secure though. So, but the Google, if you use the Google account linking, that's going to be your most secure method to tell who the user is. Yeah, I pretty much trust that. That's not going to be like fake information. With that said, actually, I did miss one thing. Which I didn't show off in the code here. Right, anyone could hit your endpoint and fake data, let's say. So you can also authorize or check to make sure that request is legitimate. And so this is the code. Basically, Google, with every request, will send you an authorization token. And so it's actually a JSON web token. This isn't super secure, but unfortunately, this is the way they say to do it right now. You can check to make sure the project ID matches with the project ID in the console here. So that's one way you can make sure, at least as a Google, a Google request, it's not like someone just hitting you with random data. But that user string, like this would be pretty secure. Like I doubt anyone's going to break that, at least right now. So.
Yeah, I'm struggling with how I would know that to begin with, though.
Well, so what's going to happen is, and I'm not showing this off here in this particular thing, but part of the flow of that would be like, they would say, okay, Google, talk to whatever. And then since you're requesting,
Let's talk.
sure. Since you're requesting account linking, they would say, Google would then ask the person, are you okay with linking their account? And so Google's now going to send you that account, and they'll send you the user ID that corresponds to that account. And so now you'll have that information.
So they give you both.
Yeah. I don't know if you can get email or not. I haven't tried it out yet. But like this ID would be something that you could trust there on afterwards. It wouldn't be just like a random set of letters and numbers. But there would be like another step to this process where they would send you that information, and then the accounts would be linked to your app. And then from now on, you have a user ID that you can trust. Any other questions on
Is this ID unique to your app?
I
Or
think
would they
it-
send this to everyone?
I think it might be unique to your app. That's what I haven't investigated, because I'm assuming you can use it somehow with like their OAuth system, so you could add stuff to people's calendars or check their email or something like that too. So I'm assuming this is probably like an OAuth token of some sort that you can use, or maybe they give you that in the account setup process. So maybe you get that in that step. And if you want to use that, you basically just have to come in and turn this option on right here. So you come in and fill this form out, and this is actually from the Google Developer Console. So you have to go get some credentials. So yeah, this looks like all OAuth stuff. So basically any of the Google APIs that use OAuth, you could use them in here and link that account that way. So yeah, you would get like email, the user's email, any of that information you want to request.
I have one other question.
Yep.
Say you've already set up OAuth for one of your applications on like the Google Web Developers Console. Is there like an API you can turn on for the Google Home, like the Google Actions?
Once you start a project, it turns all that stuff on for you. So if you want to link the accounts, you just have to make sure you use those same tokens that you use for your other app. So put all those same URLs, and I know you went through it, run that same information in. So yeah, so that's all OAuth configuration. Yeah, there we go. So this is all the stuff that you could request. So we could request like email, calendar as a scope, Drive, if you want Google Drive access, any of those things that Google does, you could request that now. You will get scrutinized more if you do the account linking. So it took me like,
What do you mean by screen?
so when you're done, yes, the page. So this is my real app. When you're done and you're ready to submit your app, you come in here and you hit submit. And so they basically, you have to go through like an approval process.
Okay. Before
So-
you go on that.
And that normally takes like a couple days, but you'll probably get denied the first time through because you have to fix something. So it's actually a little bit slow. And then once you get approved, for some reason it takes like 3 days for them to deploy stuff. So I have no reason why.
So what did you get denied for?
I forget the first time, and they're really vague about how they deny you for things. The first time I just didn't fill out, like my app was totally fine, but I didn't fill out their form correctly. And it was like, okay, well, what part of the form didn't I fill out correctly? So you can see it took me a couple days to get that version published. Then I finally got published. guess a month later? No, maybe not, I don't know. And then you can see I got denied again. I actually put my app in the family section of their store, since it's like intended for kids, so that has extra scrutiny also. And so my terms of service were not child friendly, so I got denied for that. And so then I added 4 words to my terms of service, and they were okay with it. So, so
Could you keep your action private and then choose to privately distribute it?
I don't know. I mean, you can definitely keep it in test mode, and you can add other testers, so you can do that. Yeah, that might be one way. I know a lot of their apps, that's what you have to do is like keep like a testers list. So I've done that before for other stuff. All right, any other questions? All right, well, thanks for coming.